Hey everyone, and welcome to the latest editions of Capita's LinkedIn Live. And today, pretty great topic of how can companies from the US leverage talent in India. And I have two great people who joined our session today. So we have Amanda from RemaFirst and Spencer from Commanda. How are you both? And I appreciate you dialing in to have a chat with us today.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Amit. It's great to be here.
Awesome. And yeah, I can see, Spencer, you're on the road hustling. So what's going on?
Yeah, I'm actually getting married here, not this weekend, but the following, and running some last minute errands. Um, you know, some things are more important than work, but not
There you
this
go.
call.
Yeah, but we still commend your commitment, to the topic. So appreciate you finding the
Oh yeah,
time. But look, yeah, definitely would love to get in. So we have a lot of interesting points I think to cover off today. So Amanda, I kind of want to start with you. So if you don't mind, just for the benefit of the audience, do you want to introduce a little bit about, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that Reamer First does, specifically for companies and how it assists in the Indian market?
Absolutely. So my name is Amanda Friedel, and I work here in the partnerships at Remo First. Remo First is a global employer of record company, so we allow companies to hire where they don't have an entity. Pretty relevant to today's topic because we have a lot of employees who are hired in India where their employers don't have an entity. So we enable, in this case, like US companies and any company to hire in India and access their talent, all while being compliant.
Yeah, and I think compliance is going to be a pretty important topic for our chat today. But Spencer, I want to bring you in. Would you mind telling everyone a little bit about where you're building Commando?
yeah. So I think of Remo first. It's like this great product. We recommend it all the time to our customers. I think hiring is often the gateway drug that leads to what we solve, which is as your company expands into a market more holistically, it maybe gets a physical presence, customers, you have to start paying taxes. Maybe you want to set up an entity. That's where Commenda comes in. We're a one-stop shop in 11 countries. A click button, incorporate company, and keep it compliant all in one place.
Awesome, perfect. So I think we have really good expertise on the call today. So let's touch on with probably the most important topic where you have to start, and it's the people. So let's talk a little bit about employment and kind of hiring. So Amanda, maybe I'll start off with you first. When you look at India as a talent pool in the market, what are some of the maybe occupations you see that are quite popular? Where does the talent lie in India for that US companies can take advantage of it? And with that in mind, are there any specific challenges you see US companies face when they're trying to bring that talent on board?
Yeah, absolutely. So really good questions. And the, the hot occupations in India are really, for US companies, are the ones where US companies struggle hiring on the US state side. India is really unique. There's a very, very big employment market there. A lot of folks are graduating out of university right into the job market with skills. They have a much larger young workforce than the US does. So some of the positions that we see getting hired over in India are things like web analytics and SEO specialists, people who are doing a lot of the data mining. Also operation roles like graphic designers and UI, UX, social media managers, business analysts, marketing analysts, things like that. And then really specific ones that frankly is a talent shortage in the US are, the developers, the Android developers, iOS developers, people who are doing performance marketing and things like that. So the challenges that we find from our companies who are looking to hire in India are actually similar to some of the US challenges in respect to like, where do I find the talent? There's a big market out there, and how do I access them? So hiring and finding the right candidate is challenging. We also find that a lot of our US companies don't know where to start with the salary. I think the perception of is it's super, super cheap still. A lot of these Indian experts have come to San Fran, built their career, and gone back. And so the salaries aren't what they used to be. So I think the US companies need to understand that they have to be competitive to hire the best talent in India.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And so for us as Capita, we always have a strong presence in India as well, and we build our team there from day one. And we've been seeing, some of our customers, because, we look at equity compensation for a lot of the status in that space, and that's definitely becoming a little bit more competitive for the talent. But Spencer, on the same topic, I want to bring you in here. Obviously, as a founder in the business, you've built your team, from day one and from scratch. So do you want to talk a little bit about your hiring journey? How did you go about it? Did you leverage, your personal networks, relationships? What was the process like for you? And I'm sure it wasn't easy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think honestly, so it's funny. We actually started our business in India. So I actually moved along with my co-founder Yakov to Bangalore to start the company. And I think in some ways that made it easier, in some ways that made it harder. The ways it made it harder were that we kind of immediately had this obvious permanent establishment, which I'll talk more about later. But the way it easier was that we were able to cut through, I think, a lot of the problems that American companies have hiring in India. We were able to cut through them a lot faster and totally hit the nail on the head with all those things. Like, for example, top engineering talent in Bangalore is not that much cheaper than top engineering talent in where I'm from, Raleigh, North Carolina at this point. But it's just world class, right? So it's better than the Raleigh, North Carolina talent. And so I think that was something we started to realize. I think there's all these interesting cultural differences that we were able to cut through a lot faster. The funniest one is probably that the word okay means something very different in India. In fact, it means a million different things in India. In America, okay means yes. And I think you're able to figure that out faster when you're on the ground. But no, I think the Indian market, it's full of, I think, 20 years ago, there was this IT narrative. And I think to Amanda's point again, the depth and width of talent that you can get in India now. I call it product talent. This is everything from design to, front end, back end, even AI engineering. We found some incredible people in Bangalore. And I think you're seeing one thing we see with our customers is these larger multinational corporations and set up. They always have some name like Global Excellence Centers or something like this.
Sure,
but the idea is that you can really hire elite world-class product talent in India. And I don't know if there's always a slight lag time back in the US where a lot of my founder friends are still just trying to hire a back-end engineer or something like that and just underselling the market completely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely some misconceptions, but I think it's pretty well known that talent is there, and it's a pretty good place to build your team. So now that we've kind of established, look, it's worth considering looking into. So Amanda, how would you recommend companies go about it? Because let's say you want to start hiring in India, but you're not just sure how to go about it, right? So obviously for you provide employer and record services, but do you want to consider contractors? How does the employment agreements work as well? So what are some of the, practical considerations that come into play when you start building your team from your experience?
Well, so, Remo First is we do contractor payments and we do EOR. So you can pay your employees either way until you're ready to set up an entity. And that's when you bring Spencer and team in on that. But to land and expand in India, you really do have two options when you're hiring people. So it is the contractor. And I think a lot of people default to contractor because it's easy. They feel like, I'll just pay them. But I think we all noted that finding a right employee is really difficult in India, and you want to hold on to them because they're world-class talent. So similar to in the US, you want to lock them in. You don't really necessarily want to hire them as a short-term contract. You can start there, but you probably want to put them under an employee agreement. So that said, I'll just get into a little bit of the differences for contractors and employees in India. Yep. So contractors in India are generally for a fixed term or a short term, up to 9 months. They're limited in the hours they're supposed to be working on the contract per week. And that employee has the right to work for anybody. So if you have issues maybe with non-competes or you don't want your tech being leaked into other organizations, a contractor is definitely not the way to go. When you look at hiring them as an employee, an EOR is the best way to do it because it locks them in through an employee agreement, and that can start anywhere from 6 months out to an end term on it. The benefits include monthly salary, the payroll arrangements locked in, and they get the benefits and the pensions that are built in with India, which is required for India employees. I will note this, that in India, the taxes are significantly lower than a U.S. employee. So it usually isn't a benefit to go EOR versus contractor because you don't have to pay that much more to bring somebody on full time. In the US, there's all these other contributions that make it really expensive.
Yep.
India has so much less tax burden that the price difference is not that high. So we usually encourage people to do EOR unless it is truly, this is a 3-month term, we need you to rebuild our app. Go contractor, it makes total sense. But if you're bringing him on for a true employee, take a look at EOR.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And look, also considering the employment law, the regulations, payroll, it's all important. And Spencer, you also touched on compliance early on and having the permanent establishment and all the other considerations. And compliance in India can be also quite tricky. There's quite a bit of burden that come into play in different ways. So do you want to talk us through maybe some of the kind of highlights of the key areas that companies need to be mindful about that may catch them off guard?
Yeah, first of all, like the first thing we tell people is if you do not have to set up an entity in India, like if you're just hiring a few people or something like that, totally, go with Remo first or someone like that, just hire them in the lowest touch way possible. Like that is the correct strategy. And we're happy to lose a customer where possible on that because it's obviously the right advice. But, let's say you to a point where you have customers or in India, you want to take an office or you want certain maybe like IP protections. Okay, you're going to set up an Indian company. Right off the bat, one thing for American businesses that I think they're just shocked by when they set up in India is that, we generate these compliance calendars for our customers that show all of your filings for a given year. The average US corporation is going to see something like 10 filings at the startup stage. An Indian corporation, I think just if you a quick glance, it looks like 50 to 60 realistically in year one. I mean, it's just a lot of work. Obviously, Commenda makes it so easy, obviously, but it's still a lot of work. Something you got to do, something you got to manage. And then on top of that, you have to think about, all the local labor laws. And then you have to think about things like transfer pricing and how do I actually shift funds compliantly between my entities. It's a lot of complexity to add. But, India in particular they do set up their rules in such a way that they'll capture you a lot earlier in your business. Typically, if you want to do any kind of business on the ground in India, they are going to find some way to get you to have to set up a subsidiary. The kind of very broad concept of this in international taxation rules is permanent establishment, which is this idea that, whether you've registered your business or not, are you operating a business in our country? And I think, Reno first, and these EORs are to completely, follow those rules while hiring. But once you get outside of hiring, it does get very dicey very fast. And then that's when you come to Commenda.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the points you've brought up are pretty important because you'll impact everything into the operations. Even if you want to bill your other clients in India, your invoicing and GST and everything will come in. It'll be asking you for all this information, right? So the specific forms you have to provide for you to be able to sell an invoice. So that's something to be mindful of.
Absolutely. Like taking payments, for our first few months in operations as a business, we didn't realize Stripe wasn't going to work in India. That ultimately is what drove us to set up a subsidiary, was collecting payments from customers. And now we have a Razor Pay, and it's a great thing. But, it's just the fun of doing business in India is that there's always, some rule or some regulatory body that you've just now some new alphabet soup that you have to learn about.
Yeah, absolutely. And Spencer, one of the things that you kind of mentioned, and maybe Amanda, I'll bring you in here, but when you think about compliance, the most common pain point, and no matter where you are in the world, is tax, right? So there's probably a few considerations that companies do need to keep in mind in terms of the tax regime and things to look out for. So from your experience, are there any specific points in the tax regime in India that catches people off guard that need to be mindful about in terms of deductions, tax rates, withholding, reporting? What are some of the key aspects people need to be aware of?
Yeah, speaking specifically to a foreign audience that's coming into India, I think maybe the thing that is a bit shocking to a lot of foreign businesses is that you're going to be reporting taxes on a monthly basis from pretty early on. And once you trip that GST, the goods and services tax, once you trip that threshold, you're going to be reporting it on a monthly basis. It's there's a multi-step process. where you have to report your invoices, and then you kind of there's a couple of filings associated with that each month. I think TDS this is like the withholding tax. That's a pretty standard concept. I think most businesses are going to be comfortable and familiar with something like that. And then also, the other thing that I think surprises foreign businesses is the requirement for an annual audit. Obviously, in the United States, you can provide kind of unofficial financial statements. In India, you actually have to bring in a third party to audit your financial statements on a yearly basis, which I was quite shocked by, to be honest. And I know many other foreign businesses are often surprised.
Yeah, there you go. And speaking of tax, Amanda, so obviously there's a few considerations for team members to keep in mind as well. So what are some of the nuances in terms of relations between employer and team members in India that the company should be aware of?
Yeah, so the employees takes most of the tax burden for the employment tax. So they pay the income tax and they pay the employee provident fund, which is deducted out of their paychecks. But one of the things I have found interesting is that with the new tax regime in India, employees there can choose their tax regime, whether the old tax regime or the new tax regime. I will probably get out of my element here, but basically, depending on what slab you fall into, it eliminates the deductions that you can claim. A slab is similar to our tax brackets, but there's a lot more slabs in India. And so that burden falls onto the employee to choose which slab they want to be in. Not which slab, I'm sorry, which regime they want to be in, depending on which slab they fall into. And basically, they make a decision on, do I take home more if I, in US terms, like take my deductions, or do I just take a standard deduction and fall into this slab? So I thought that was super interesting, the way India sets that up.
Yep, not for sure. And I guess the tax regime and all the rules that come into play like cover everything from compensation to equity as well. And I guess just to sort of jump in here, and what we're seeing with a lot of organizations, the way you've set up your plan is also quite important. Whether you register in India, whether you have a foreign entity out of which you want to issue equity, it will actually dictate what you can or cannot do in terms of even who you can give options to, right? Because there are certain rules that will come into play if you're a local company versus a foreign company. So all these things are quite important to consider. And when you think about sort of managing, ongoing obligations and reporting as well, so the payroll is probably another area to keep in mind. So Spencer, if you don't mind, maybe from your experience, like are there any specific challenges companies may face or you've, faced in your journey so far, helping many organizations in terms of running payroll independently in the jurisdictions? Is there something that is tricky around the bank accounts or any other aspects you would highlight?
So we don't directly support on payroll. So I don't necessarily want to go too deep into the day-to-day, but just my experience, even just running a business in India and having to pay people there. First of all, people will have very different preferences, as Amanda got to, about how they want to be taxed and, how they want to, kind of classify themselves under the tax regime. To your point, issuing equity to our employees in India has definitely been a challenge. In fact, we're still in the process of doing it. And in general, just the amount of work you have to do between when you employ someone and when you're able to pay them. I think I was like very.
Might a lot of Spencer, but I'm sure he'll be back shortly, so we'll put him back in. So Amanda, just as a continue in terms of the ongoing sort of obligations and running payroll as well, but there's a few, I guess, other administrative things we can consider in sort of the entire life cycle, from onboarding employees to offboarding. So in the entire journey of the relationship between the company and employees, like what are some of the other things you normally advise your customers about?
I do just want to touch on that. I think I didn't mention that the employer does match the retirement fund for India. So that is something to note. I think I admitted that earlier. But as far as the life cycle of the employee, India can onboard pretty quickly. In Remo First, we can onboard an employee in about a week in India. Yep. One consideration you do need to think of when you're offboarding an employee is after they've gone through their probationary period, you do have to give 1 month notice. And that's some of the organic knowledge that you might not know. It is not a right to work. So you do have to you have to give them notice, and that you do need to pay them if the notice isn't there. So those are things that you generally have to think about. You can buy up the benefits with dental and vision plan for your employees. And oh, we got Spencer back. So those are just some considerations that you might think about when you're employing in India.
Yeah, for sure, and that's all important. And well, welcome back, Spencer. So Amanda and I we just started chatting about sort of the life cycle of employees, but you unfortunately got dropped off halfway through your thoughts. So feel free to jump back in and continue. Let us know if you can hear us. Okay. Sorry, yeah, Spencer, I think you're back on if you want to try that again.
Oh, I don't know if he can hear us.
Yeah. Sorry, you were saying that you guys had left off somewhere?
Yeah, no. We were just talking about life cycle of employees from onboarding to offboarding, but when you were speaking earlier, unfortunately, you dropped off. So if you want to continue your thought, please feel free to jump back in.
Yeah, no. I guess you're talking about taking it from talking about offboarding as well. One thing we've also been shocked by is how long it takes employees to transition out of roles. Like we've lined up all these great hires, and they're like, "Okay, I can join you in 2 months when my notice period ends." Which in the U.S. it's 2 weeks notice. A lot of times it's like if you're ready to go, you're ready to go. I imagine that's another advantage of using the global hiring platform. Although I would defer that to Amanda.
Yeah, we still have to go by their employee obligations, but that is the key that we advise you on that stuff. And you can put that in the employee agreement at the front end of it too. So,
is the leave period is that actually a government? So because again, we don't really touch the HR stuff directly. Is that a government mandate that you have to make a
1 month is a notice period, so that's standard.
Okay.
Yeah,
we've actually seen as long as like 3 months. We have one person we've lined up who has a 3-month notice period.
Wow.
We're actually trying to figure out if we can like buy it out. I mean, it's quite like ridiculous. And yeah, it's a goofy thing, but you got to follow the rules, right?
Yep. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, and look, in some industries that may be even a standard. It's a lot of financial service institutions, right? Especially larger ones. That's can be standard at some levels, organizations and legal professions as well. But yeah, definitely that nuances and the difference between countries is something that you need to be mindful about, especially when you're trying to build a team fast. And 3 months in the startup world is like eternity. Can pivot like 5 times in between that and change direction of the business. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Yeah. Look, Amanda, Spencer, I appreciate your time. Just being mindful that we're kind of coming up sort of to the end of our session. I know we've touched on quite a bit. We touched on about talent, employment, some compliance consideration, tax, the entire life cycle, payroll. So there's a lot of different topics as well. But if I give you some time to kind of wrap things up as well, and then just to reflect on, I guess you've worked with many organizations, help them out, expand their presence, grow their business, specifically in India. Spencer, maybe we'll start with you. What will be sort of key advice or the main learnings you would like to share with the audience, and what do you think everyone should know based on your experience so far?
Yeah, my advice to any foreign business coming into India or thinking about coming into India is one, it's like totally worth it. You should completely do it. It's going to be really hard, but it's a great market. I would take the time to come to India physically, talk to people, build relationships, understand the culture. The food is delicious, so it's totally worth the trip. And just understand that there's going to be a million really frustrating things, but that there's so much talent, opportunity. It's one of the fastest growing economies in the world. The government, in its own way, is trying to move in the right direction at the speed it's comfortable doing so. I think there's great innovations in places like Gift City. I think there's been a kind of steady long run trend towards liberalization on kind of different economic policies. And it's obviously worth the commitment. You saw companies go all in on China, and maybe now they're thinking, well, we got burned there. I don't want to go into India because what if it's just the next China where I go in, I invest, and then they go kind of like this evil authoritarian but it's very hard to see that happening with India. It's this wonderful democracy and a great market, and I think it's totally worth the effort. So that's kind of my high level message to the audience.
No, that's a pretty good one. And if I may to add to that, when we think about it being a very interesting market, in a way, one thing that I guess many people don't realize, it's not one big happy market. Very much like the US, you have so many different states, and it's a whole bunch of different countries with different cultures as well. India's probably, if not as, probably even more so diverse. And in terms of cuisine, depending where you go, but there's so many different great hubs even in the startup world, right? So if you're in Bangalore, there's Hyderabad, Mumbai, very strong financial services as well. You know, there's the NCR, so Delhi, Noida. We have a big team in Pune as well. So a lot of great talent everywhere, right? And it's
absolutely
very different tendencies. So there's definitely a lot to explore, even on the personal level, right? So even if you're not expanding the business, I think it's worth making a trip and checking things out for sure. But Amanda, so it's a similar offer to you. So just to wrap things up, anything you would like to share with the audience? Anyone listening now will be checking out this video in the weeks to come. What will be your key advice?
I mean, I can't follow Spencer on that because Spencer has lived it. He's gotten his hands dirty and he's done it, which is awesome. The only thing I need to just reiterate is there's so much talent in India and they're producing it so much more. I think their average the average working age is 20. Ours is US is 38. So there's going to be continuous talent coming up through the funnel. So I think US companies keeping an open mind to expand their talent pool there, it's a big opportunity. So, but Spencer said it better, especially with the food.
So I think that covers everything. And I guess from our experience at Capita, we have a pretty awesome team in every single part of our business, from customer success to engineering to product to design to consulting to evaluation. So everything that we do, we have team members in India and they're pretty amazing to help drive our business, right? So everything Amanda and Spencer say, I think we live through it day by day. And that's, how we build, most of our team. That's why we have a lot of success in Capita. So definitely it's something close to our heart ourselves. And, with the kind of work we do, we obviously support a lot of organizations in different jurisdictions. And we increasingly see more, through the equity grants that we help companies issue in different jurisdictions. There's definitely more and more employees coming in on board and being hired by many great organizations around the world. So with that in mind, so everyone who did tune in, hopefully you got a glimpse into what the market has to offer. Hopefully you learned a few things or two. I think Spencer done a pretty great job outlining all the different challenges. And yes, you should not be scared because I think, it's not going to be necessarily super easy, but definitely there's providers that can help you make that process a little bit smoother. But in the end of the day, it's probably worth all that effort and can help your business really take that next step forward. So Amanda, Spencer, thank you very much, both of you, for spending some time. Spencer, most importantly, look forward to hearing about your celebrations next week. You have a big week ahead, so all the best and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, and congrats, Spencer.
All right, you guys have a good one.
All right, thanks all. And that was the next edition of Capita's Link to Life. Tune in next week for the next topic and keep an eye on Rima First, Commander's, Capita's LinkedIn pages to hear more about how we support companies around the world. Cheers all and have a good one.